Not all crimes are solved, but every crime has a story. Welcome to View on Crime. At 10:43 p.m., a desperate 911 call shattered the silence of a quiet suburban street. A woman's voice, shaking, frantic, pleaded for help. "He's not breathing. There's so much blood. Please, hurry." Minutes later, police arrived at a dimly lit apartment, finding 32-year-old Brian Thompson lifeless on the floor. A crime scene that spoke of chaos, violence, and secrets. But here's the strange part. There were no signs of forced entry, no obvious motive, and the only witness? She swore she had no idea what happened. What started as a routine investigation quickly unraveled into a web of deception, betrayal, and a case that would leave even the most seasoned detectives baffled. Who killed Brian Thompson, and why? Let's go back to the beginning. Before that fateful night, Brian Thompson was just another face in the city, a man with dreams, struggles, and a life that, to most, seemed ordinary. Born and raised in Chicago, Brian was 32 years old, ambitious, and well-liked. He worked as a financial analyst, spending his days buried in spreadsheets and market trends. But outside the office, he was known for something else: his charm. Brian had an active social life. On weekends, you'd find him at local bars, sharing drinks with friends, effortlessly blending into any crowd. He had that rare ability to make people feel like they'd known him for years. He was confident, smooth, but not without flaws. Beneath the charm, there were whispers, rumors of debts, of risky business deals, and relationships that ended on bad terms. His love life was just as complicated. Brian had been in and out of several relationships, some passionate, others toxic. One ex-girlfriend who wished to remain anonymous later described him as the kind of man who always had a secret. Was she speaking metaphorically, or did Brian truly have something to hide? In the weeks leading up to his murder, friends noticed a shift in Brian's behavior. He became more cautious, more distant. He stopped going out as much, changed his usual routines, and even mentioned feeling uneasy. He told a close friend that he thought someone was following him. Cars parked outside his apartment at odd hours, late-night phone calls where no one spoke on the other end. At first, he laughed it off, but then, just days before his death, he said something chilling: "If anything happens to me, don't believe the first story you hear." Was Brian just being paranoid? Or did he know something that put his life in danger? One thing was certain: the fear in his voice was real, and soon his worst fears would come true. On the night of April 17th, Brian Thompson's world came to a violent end. It started as an ordinary evening. He had left work at 6:30 p.m., stopped by a local grocery store, and returned to his apartment around 7:15. Security cameras captured him carrying a bag of groceries, looking relaxed, unaware that within hours, he would be dead. At 10:43 p.m., a frantic 911 call was placed from Brian's apartment. The caller, a woman, was barely coherent. "He's not breathing. There's blood everywhere. Please hurry." Minutes later, paramedics arrived, but it was already too late. Brian was found collapsed in his living room, a deep wound in his abdomen, his body surrounded by an unsettling scene of overturned furniture and broken glass. The struggle had been violent, but strangely, there was no sign of forced entry. Police immediately secured the scene, searching for clues. The kitchen knife used in the attack was found just feet away from Brian's body, wiped clean of fingerprints. No valuables were missing. His wallet, phone, and watch remained untouched. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was personal. The woman who called 911 was still at the scene when officers arrived. Her name? Emily Carter, Brian's on-again, off-again girlfriend. She claimed she had arrived moments earlier to find the apartment in chaos and Brian barely clinging to life. She swore she had nothing to do with it, but detectives weren't convinced. Her clothes were spotless, No blood on her hands, yet her story had inconsistencies. Why did she wait nearly 2 minutes before calling 911? And why had neighbors heard shouting, but only one voice? As investigators dug deeper, a darker picture began to emerge. Emily wasn't the only person with a motive. Brian's financial records revealed large cash withdrawals in the weeks before his murder, money that couldn't be accounted for. His phone records showed heated conversations with an unknown number. And then, there was a cryptic text message sent just hours before he died. "Meet me tonight. No one else can know." Who was Brian planning to meet? And was it that meeting that sealed his fate? With Brian Thompson dead and a crime scene full of unanswered questions, detectives turned their focus to the most obvious suspect, Emily Carter. She was the last known person to see him alive. Her story was inconsistent, and their relationship had been far from perfect. Friends described their romance as volatile, passionate one moment, explosive the next. There were even reports of past arguments that turned physical. But was Emily truly capable of murder? She insisted she had nothing to do with Brian's death. She claimed she had arrived at his apartment unannounced, found him bleeding on the floor, and immediately called 911. But surveillance footage told a different story. A neighbor's doorbell camera captured Emily arriving at Brian's apartment over 20 minutes before her 911 call. If she wasn't the killer, what was she doing all that time? Then came a shocking revelation. Emily wasn't the only person in Brian's life who had reason to want him dead. Investigators uncovered troubling financial records that pointed to a second suspect. Brian had been withdrawing large sums of cash in the weeks leading up to his death. More disturbingly, he had sent several desperate texts to an unknown number, including one that read, "I need more time. Please don't do this." That number led detectives to Daniel Rourke, a known loan shark with a violent reputation. Brian had apparently borrowed a significant amount of money, an amount he was struggling to pay back. When questioned, Rourke denied any involvement, claiming he hadn't seen Brian in weeks. But phone records told a different story, calls between the two on the day of the murder. Was this a debt collection gone wrong? Or was Rourke simply an easy scapegoat? And then, there was the mystery text sent just hours before Brian died. "Meet me tonight. No one else can know." Police traced the number back to an unexpected name, Brian's own co-worker, Mark Delaney. Mark was one of Brian's closest friends at work, yet he never came forward after the murder. When questioned, he claimed the meeting was about a company issue, something confidential. But his body language told another story. He was nervous, avoiding eye contact. And when detectives checked Brian's work emails, they found something disturbing. A drafted but unsent email addressed to HR, accusing Mark of embezzlement. 3 suspects, 3 motives, a jealous ex-girlfriend, a dangerous loan shark, and a co-worker with a lot to lose. But who had the most to gain from Brian's death? And more importantly, who had the nerve to kill? As detectives pieced together the final clues, the truth behind Brian Thompson's murder slowly came into focus. The evidence against Emily Carter, the inconsistencies, the surveillance footage, was compelling, but it wasn't enough to prove she had committed the crime. And while Daniel Rourke had motive, his alibi checked out. He had been seen at a bar across town at the time of the murder. That left one person: Mark Delaney. Phone records showed that Brian had called Mark multiple times on the day of his murder. The text, "Meet me tonight. No one else can know," was the key to everything. Brian had discovered Mark's embezzlement scheme and was planning to report it. If that information got out, Mark stood to lose everything: his job, his reputation, and possibly even his freedom. When confronted, Mark denied any wrongdoing, but forensic analysis uncovered a damning piece of evidence: a single fingerprint on the kitchen knife used to kill Brian, Mark's fingerprint. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Mark finally cracked. He admitted to meeting Brian that night, but claimed things got out of hand. An argument turned into a fight, and in a moment of panic, he grabbed the knife. He insisted it wasn't premeditated, but the prosecution didn't see it that way. A jury convicted him of second-degree murder, sentencing him to 25 years in prison. Brian Thompson's murder was solved, but the scars remained. His family and friends were left with the painful truth that his life was taken over greed, betrayal, and a desperate attempt to cover up a crime. But perhaps the most chilling part of this case? Brian knew something was coming. His warning, "If anything happens to me, don't believe the first story you hear," was eerily prophetic. And now we leave you with this question. Did justice truly prevail? Or was there more to Brian's story than we'll ever know? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The case may be over, but the mystery remains. This was View on Crime.